I want to talk about the position battles for Notre Dame, guys, at safety, because this is what's going to tell us whether or not this secondary as a whole can be elite. I think we talked about this on Thursday's show when we talked about the cornerbacks. There's an expectation that this is going to be one of the best cornerback rooms in college football. Are they first, second, third, fourth, fifth? That's going to be determined by, what Christian Gray does. Does he repeat last year? If he does, then they're top 5 cornerback room. If he improves his game and does what we think he's capable of, then they become 1, 2, or 3 in some realm of just lockdown corners. Plus, we have high expectations for obviously for Devontae Smith at the nickel. Depth is talented and all that kind of stuff. That alone, with it being a good safety room, and I do think we can at least expect it to be a good safety room.
Agreed.
Like a good, solid top 25 caliber safety room. That alone makes this one of the best secondaries in college football, in my opinion. And I would say that this safety room of what we know about it, just what we know, meaning like what Jaylen Strowman did at Virginia Tech, what Adon Schuler's done, and just the talent, because everybody has some level of projection for the most part. It's a top 15 safety room. Can we at least agree on that being the floor of the safety position?
Yeah.
If it's just okay, just everybody kind of does what they did, in the past, it's a top 15 safety room. If we get 2023 version of Jaylen Strowman and 2024 version of Adon Schuler, this is a good safety room. This is a top 10 to 12 probably safety room with some good talented young players. Whether or not this becomes like an elite secondary, like a truly elite secondary, where it's like it's elite on both levels, second and third level, because I view corners as second level players and safeties as third level players. That's going to be determined by what happens opposite Adon Schuler. And because if Adon stays the way he was last year, it's a pretty good football player, but how good will that other group be? And I don't think the safety room has to be elite for the secondary to be elite. It just has to be pretty good for the entire secondary to be elite. So that's going to be determined by who wins that battle, because there's 2 types of position battles happening in fall camp at safety. One is who's going to start opposite Adon Schuler. That's one. And then 2, what is the rotation? How does the rotation shake out? Like, who's the number 3? Does the number 4 force his way onto the field? Does the number 5 force his way onto the field? And the other thing, Vince, is we've seen at Notre Dame in recent years, it's like, okay, is it a 90-10 snap split, an 80-20 snap split, a 70-30 snap split, is 60-40? Like, where is the breakup? Because last year it was, if you look at Xavier Watts last year, for example, at safety, Xavier played 970 snaps. He was number 1. And then number 2 was Adon Schuler. And then number 3 at 768. And then number 3 was Rod Hurd at 409. So will it be similar to that? Or, is it going to be a thing where it's more of a true split? Because if I count up the snaps there, if I'm doing this correctly, Rod Hurd had 409 snaps. Don Schuler had 768. Xavier Watts had 970. So that's 2,147 snaps. So last year, if you look at it, Rod Hurd played 19% of the snaps of the rotation last year. Adon Schuler played, he had 35% of all those snaps. And then obviously Xavier Watts, of the total snaps they played, then you had Xavier Watts played or had of those numbers, he had 45.2. So you saw his split of those reps was much greater. And then if you look at it from just a pure standpoint of just how many snaps they played last year as a defense, last year Notre Dame played, 1,035 plays. So Xavier Watts played 93.7 of the snaps last year. And Rod Hurd played 39.5 of the snaps, percent of the snaps last year. And Adon Schuler played 74.2. So you had Xavier dominated the reps. Adon took a bunch of them, and then Rod would just he was there, just sort of a hybrid guy, go in there, part of the rotation, take some of the burden off of those guys. But those two guys dominated the snaps. Does that happen again this year? Or does that other spot, is it more of a, they both kind of play kind of deal? And what we've seen in recent years is it's been two guys kind of dominated the position, has been what we've seen. It was the same way the year before. Xavier played 708 snaps. DJ Brown played 595. Ramon Henderson played 304. Like, it was three guys, and then the two starters kind of had the bigger bulk of the snaps. This year I could see it being a little bit different. But that's what this fall camp battle is going to determine, Vince, is where are you on the depth chart? And then the second part of that is how much of the volume, how big is your role? And I tell you what, it's one of the more intriguing storylines coming out of fall that I'm looking forward to going into fall camp is, what does this safety room look like when it's all said and done?
Yeah, the dynamic of the safety room is super interesting because you don't have the proven commodity. You do have a proven commodity in Adon Schuler, but he's looked at in a little bit of a different light than what Xavier Watts had coming into 2024. There's not really a whole lot of scenarios where Al Golden last year was willing to or looking to take Xavier Watts off of the football field, short of it being, hey, you kind of just need a breather.
Yep.
Then towards the end of the season, you started to see the dynamic change of, they would put three safeties on the field together, and Rod Hurd would also be. So what is that? What is the Chris Ash impact in that, especially given the depth of talent that you have in the room? I'm with you, man. That's going to be really fun to watch unfold in fall camp.
So let's jump into the players in question, gentlemen. And let's start with the oldest guy in the room because he is a transfer student. I believe he's one of the oldest guys in the room anyway. I haven't checked birthdays recently.
He's a fifth-year senior.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Oldest guy is a true junior.
I mean, I didn't check
Luke
IDs.
Towns was held back like 3 years in high school, right?
Yeah.
in elementary school or something. I gotta go out on a limb and say, or Jaylen Strowman's like a whiz kid that graduated at 15.
Right.
Young
Sheldon Jr. Yeah.
True either. He's not Austin Simmons, from Ole Miss.
Right.
So went from, I'm going to reclassify from sophomore to junior. No, I'm just going to go ahead and graduate.
Just going to be done. It's going to be done. But no, so let's start with Strowman and kind of, Trev, why don't you give us a little bit about his background, where he came from, his career up to this point and kind of what Notre Dame, why they went and got him. You know what I mean? And obviously, Brian, you can fill in some gaps if there are any. Don't expect any. But if let's talk about who Jaylen Strowman is and why he's at Notre Dame in a gold helmet.
Yeah, they brought him in a very similar spot to why they brought in Rod Hurd in 2024. They had a vacated safety position. They needed somebody to step up as a starter. So they went and they got a veteran that has experience playing against a similar ACC schedule than what Notre Dame is going to face this year. There's going to be a lot of familiar opponents for Jaylen Strowman. And he was somebody that was getting some early, leading up to the 2024 season. He was getting some day two NFL draft projections, barring the season that he had at Virginia Tech. Unfortunately, we know the story. He got injured, season-ending injury in their season opener against Vanderbilt. But if you go and you look at what he did the year before, in 2023, he had 55 total tackles. He had 2 passes defended. The interesting thing with Strowman is how he will be used in this style of defense, because he was a very much an alley safety, come down, blow up screens. He was a sure tackler. I've seen a couple of highlight videos out there of him in the Twitter sphere and around there on social media. He's a hard hitter, similar in that sense to Adon Schuler, a little bit bigger. He's like 6'1", close to 200 pounds.
He's a little over 200.
Yep, little over 200. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't have the ability to cover, because if so, I don't know how much Mike Mickens would have been like, hey, please come to South Bend type of deal.
Yeah.
It's just Virginia Tech never asked him to do it.
Right. He was targeted 12 times his last year as a full-time starter.
Yeah.
He gave up 8 completions on 12 targets. And whereas like Xavier Watts, if you look at Xavier the last 2 years, Xavier was targeted 32 times each of the last 2 years. So are you telling me the teams are just like, no, we're going to pick on Xavier Watts more than Jaylen Strowman? No, if you break down the film, they just didn't put him in those positions. They'd rob him downhill. They'd put him in the alley. They just didn't put him in a lot of, pattern match type stuff or man type stuff where he was going to be in quote unquote coverage areas. And so, yes, to your point, Trev, like it's an unknown from a he was asked standpoint. But I love the part that you said is Mike Mickens didn't bring this kid in thinking he was going to be a liability in coverage.
Yeah.
He saw something on film that said, okay, this kid has the tools to be good in coverage if given the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then enter the unknown. It's unfortunate that we didn't get to see him in spring practices or play in the blue gold game. Because one of the questions is the player who is expected to step up and replace Xavier Watts on the depth chart, not from a production standpoint, big picture, was supposed to be Jaylen Strowman, the experienced vet that they get in from another ACC team. Unfortunately, due to some things, he needed part of his injury cleaned up from the one that he suffered against Vanderbilt in the season opener. We didn't get to see him this spring. I believe he was a participant in the winter workouts and then was held out for the spring. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, he was brought in for the winter. Yeah.
Yep.
And then he had to get some stuff cleaned up, and that's why they chose not to play him in the spring.
Gotcha. He is one of the people that I'm very much looking forward to seeing play in fall camp, because as we're going to break down here in a little bit, the rest of the safety room had a very good spring, which on one hand puts your mind at ease a little bit, but then on the other hand, it adds to the dynamic of the room of, okay, now really what does this look like? But Jaylen Strowman, he brings the experience to the table. Played against very similar, almost identical opponents in certain cases that Notre Dame is going to be facing this season. But this spring, because of the unknown around his coverage ability, that's going to be one of the bigger things that I'm going to be looking for in fall.
So, my question is going to be, is Jaylen Strowman best suited to be a Don Schuler's backup or Don Schuler's sidekick?
His running mate, yeah.
Running mate. It's a much better, because sidekick has such a like a level. Running mate. I think it's a good way of putting it. I don't want to say partner in crime, because I'm like, no, that doesn't fit a Don Schuler at all. But just kind of looking at it from the standpoint, because his game is very similar to a Don's.
Yeah.
Based on what he did at Tech.
Physicality and all that kind of stuff.
And just how he was used to come downhill and be a good tackler and those type of things. And so that's what he's going to have to prove if he wants to win a starting job is, can you cover? Mm-hmm. Now, look, they're not going to ask him to be Xavier Watts. They didn't bring him in saying, hey, we think you can be Xavier Watts, but it's more so saying, hey, we believe in your athletic skill. We believe in your ability to do this if put in the right position, so we think you can thrive in this role. But he's going to have to prove that. That's the key. At the very least, if Jaylen Strowman is your second best safety or best safety, so basically in one of the top two, you're going to use them in ways where you're going to be pretty good against the run. And there's things you can do coverage-wise to protect your safeties a little bit in those situations that don't put them in a whole lot of covering slots, covering – you'll cover backs and tight ends, and that's pretty much what your role is going to be. I think there's things they can certainly do in that regard, fellas, where, I believe essentially that he can win the job and be basically the same exact version of a Don Schuler if he's just that next best guy. But is that going to be good enough? So like that part I'm not concerned about. Like, so I'm trying to figure out how I want to make this point. If he's just as good as a Don Schuler in coverage, and they're like, or stylistically, they're the same kind of player, and he's their second best safety or co 1A, 1B, whatever, you're going to be pretty good at safety. You're just going to have to alter certain things. But my question is more so this: will that be good enough to keep Bronte Johnson and Jaydon Blair, especially off the field? And will it be good enough, because I think Luke Talich is a very similar type of player to the two of them, will that even be better than what Luke Talich can be? I think that's going to be the question for Jaylen Strowman, is you got to pick this up pretty quickly. From what I'm told, he's a pretty smart guy, and he'll pick the defense up pretty well. And he was around the team all spring, so he was there for all the install. He was there for all the teaching and all that. He just didn't get to physically do a ton of it.
That kind of leads into my kind of not final question, but like the last thing I want to touch on for Strowman is the fact that he didn't participate in spring on the field. And to Trevor's point, the other guys we're going to talk about all had really good springs. So is this like a 2 steps back, 1 step forward potential situation, or does that make
For Jaylen?
Yeah, or is it no deal because he's a 5th-year guy and doesn't necessarily need to be on the field? Like, where do you fall on kind of where that puts him going into the summer and the spring, or in summer and the fall?
I don't think it's something that I'm going to ignore and act like it doesn't not going to be an impact at all, because what it did was, I think for the team as a whole, for the unit as a whole, it's going to benefit the room that he didn't practice this spring.
More reps for everybody else, yeah.
Right. And they needed it more than he did. Yes, I know he needs reps in the system and in the defense, but this is not a kid that's going to step out on the field against Miami and be like overwhelmed by the moment.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's not where a Don Schuler is. I mean, excuse me, Jaylen Strowman is. This is a kid who's, number one, his stadium is, you know, is one that is not an easy place to play. He's played at Doak Campbell against a 13-1 Florida State team. He's played at Louisville when they won 10 games and were played in the ACC title game. You know, he's played in some of those places the last couple of years. He's been in those moments. He's had to thrive in those moments. And so I don't think this is something that where I'm looking at it saying like, gee, I don't know if he can handle the moment. We know that about Jaylen Strowman. I think he's proven that. And the fact that he chose Notre Dame shows me a little bit level of maturity for him, knowing he was walking into a loaded room. So I think it helped the room as a whole, but I also don't want to act like it had no impact whatsoever negatively on Jaylen Strowman either, because twofold. Number one is you just gave a bunch of dudes with a lot of talent, a lot of reps that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And then number two, I look at it and say this is I do think he has a level that he needs to get to where he could have really benefited from the reps personally. Now, I think he can get caught up quickly if it was just he's the guy, there's no doubt, he's the starter. I think Jaylen would be fine without practicing in the spring. I think he'd be fine. But will he be fine in a competition of players of equal or in some instances superior talent? That's more of the question. Does that make sense? Like, so if there was no debate of who was going to start, let's say his 2023 season was at Notre Dame, and like, guys, look, he's going to be the starter. I wouldn't be upset about him missing the spring, even with a new D coordinator. I'd say he'll get caught up. He'll get caught up this summer and in fall camp. But I think the question is now, will it be enough to hold off the talented younger players that are also pushing?
Yeah.
That's more of my question mark. Did he give them a window to step into a void this spring?
Not necessarily a Wally Pipp situation, but similar in that you open the door and let's see if these guys take advantage of it, kind of a deal. So
it's basically what happened to Rod Hurd last year. Rod still played. Jaylen Strowman is going to play for Notre Dame this year, barring injury.
Agreed.
He's going to be a very important part of the safety room this year at Notre Dame. I have no doubt about that. Jaylen Strowman is going to play, and he's going to be an important part of the defense. But is that going to be in a Don Schuler, Xavier Watts role, or is it going to be in a Rod Hurd role?
Right.
That's the question. This isn't like where, like, to your point, that's why, you say the Wally Pipp thing and you're like, it's not the same thing because Wally Pipp never really played again.
Right, exactly.
But it's more so like, are you going to be Rod Hurd or are you going to be a Don Schuler?
Right. Yeah.
Are like that's going to be the question. And it could even be different. It could be like neither, because there's two guys that are going to play somewhat. I mean, there's a world in which Jaylen Strowman and Luke Talich and Jaydon Blair and Bronte Johnson have a much closer number of snaps. Like, it could be a thing where Jaylen Strowman doesn't start at the field safety spot, but he takes a Don's role reps when a Don needs a breather, and he also takes field safety reps when the field safety guy needs a breather. And because there's a 3-man rotation at that field safety, and he's getting a Don's reps when a Don's on the sidelines getting a breather, he may end up being number 2 or a really close 3 in snaps, even though he's not a starter. That's where I envision Jaylen having an impact this year.
So let's go through a couple of these other guys who are going to be battling for time in the back. And the first guy is a guy that has taken a very interesting path to his current position on the team, and that's Luke Talich. And he's just a great story, frankly, in my opinion. He bet on himself, it paid off, and here he is battling for a starting position. So, Trevor, I'll let you kind of lead this one off on Luke and kind of what he has to do in the fall to garner some of that playing time that it's so coveted.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Talich, to your point, it's a great story, and I love his journey up to this point. He's kind of been that special teams phenom. The last couple seasons for Notre Dame, had that big hit in the Penn State game in the Orange Bowl on punt return. Still go back and watch that once a week. Fantastic hit. But for Luke Talich, it's kind of that moment where it's like, okay, you now have your opportunity to step into the limelight on defense and meaningful snaps. He had the pick 6 against Florida State, kind of in mop-up duty at the end of the game. Now can your performance in the spring and your experience in big moments last season, can that translate into you putting it all together this fall because of the rest of the talent in the room, because of Jaylen Strowman's potential emergence? This is kind of almost like a now or never type situation for Luke Talich. He's a true junior. He has really good talent behind him. He has even more talent coming in the 2026 class. This is a big fall camp for him. And he's going to have to show that he's going to have to put a lot of the narratives to rest. We've already started to do that here on this channel, but there are some people that still view him as the walk-on. There's still some people out there that view Luke Talich. Yeah, they just like him because he's 6'4", but he's not that fast. He was a former walk-on. I know none of us three view him that way, in that he's just some walk-on that caught some fantastic opportunity. He is somebody that is a legitimate athlete that can make a significant impact on this defense. But it is going to be a big spring for him. Him in coverage, he's going to have to be able to show that he is more of a capable, safety and pass coverage, similar to what Xavier Watts was. And I'm not expecting the same amount of production. I don't think he's going to walk away this season with 6 or 7 interceptions. But he's going to have to prove that, yes, in the blue gold game, he led the team in tackles, and we've seen him fly down into the box and make some impact plays. But as we just discussed, that's a Don Schuler's strength, and that's also Jaylen Strowman's strength. Use your 6'4" frame and size to be more of an effective member of the coverage unit, not just as another alley safety. That's what I'm going to be looking for out of Luke Talich this fall.
I almost am just tired of mentioning him as a former walk-on. Because he is.
Technically, he
is. But
yes.
it's such a misleading situation of how he got to Notre Dame.
Agreed.
He had full committable offers from Utah and Washington State. He chose to come to Notre Dame because he wanted a degree from Notre Dame, and he knew that he was only going to be a walk-on for a year at most. Maybe just a semester. I think it was actually just a semester.
Yeah, I think it was.
And fortunately for him, he came from a family situation where they could handle it for the time that was needed, and he was able to do it. But Luke Talich is not he wasn't brought to Notre Dame in the same way that Chris Fink was. It's not the same kind of story of as Chris Fink stepping into a starting role and becoming an impact player. Nobody thought that Chris Fink, when he got recruited to Notre Dame, was going to be what he was. Luke Talich was brought to Notre Dame as a guy that was eventually expected to fight for a job in the safety for Notre Dame. And that's why I kind of get frustrated by that. And I've seen people say, why did he look slow on the pick 6? Well, number one, I don't think he really I don't think he was slow. He's 6'4" with really long arms. I've said this a million times. Those guys don't look as fast on the football field as they are, but you're going to cover a lot of ground. I also don't think he ever really gained his balance from catching the pass and then spinning around. You know how it is when you start running, that minute you stumble, you never get back into full stride. And I think that had everything to do with it. But I watched this kid play, and this kid's got range. Go watch him going down the field against Penn State when he lights that kid up. You're going to see a kid that can run. Go watch a guy that's running down on kickoffs. He can run. But he's not like a 4'4" guy either. But when you're 6'4" with long arms and you're a pretty smooth athlete, you don't have to be that. You don't have to be a 4'4" guy. Jaydon Blair is not a 4'4" guy either. Kyle Hamilton wasn't a 4'4" guy. Kyle Hamilton was barely a 4'5" guy and that's when he was training for several months to run the fastest he could run, and how fast he ran was going to determine, it was going to impact him millions. Because I think we can all agree that if Kyle Hamilton would have ran a 4.38 instead of like a 4.58 at the combine, he wouldn't have waited. He wouldn't have dropped till 14. And so
his second contract will make up for it.
Right. But Luke's not a burner. Like, I'm never sitting and argue like Luke's a 4.4 guy. I'm never going to argue that. I just think he's rangy. That's why I say he's more rangy than he is like fast. And on a football field, like in a 100-meter dash, okay, you can be rangy all you want. You're still getting smoked by the really fast 5'11 guy. On a football field, when it's shorter area that you're covering in different type of movements, the range overcomes a lack of pure vertical speed. Just like you'll see safeties who have great vertical speed who are terrible defensive backs because they can't run in the way that they need to. So I think when I look at Luke Talich, it's like, I'm not worried about the athleticism and the speed. What I need to see from Luke Talich is more assertiveness. That was the knock on him last year. In talking to different sources, it was Luke has all the talent in the world, but Luke's got to let it go. He's got to just like, dude, don't always be so worried about making a mistake. You don't overthink it. Don't overthink it and say, hey, like, I think I'm supposed to do this. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Just go play ball. And we still saw a little bit of that in the spring, to be honest, at times. What I liked about him in the spring game is as the game wore on, like even that first long run by Jadarian Price, Luke Talich kind of came in the hole and started to slow down, and that allowed the tight end to get off of the block and block him out of the hole. After that, he was more, okay, I'm just going to keep going and go to the ball. It's that assertiveness from Luke. He needs to be more, dude, just go play. Go play 100 miles an hour. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Trust yourself, trust your teaching, trust what you're taught, and then go play. I think that's the thing with Luke is if he can do that, then I fully expect Luke Talich to be in the rotation in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Whether that's as a starter, number 2, rotation guy, maybe he becomes the third safety instead of them putting like a rover in the game, they put a Jaylen Strowman or a Luke Talich down there as a third safety. And when they want to get against a team that's maybe running more perimeter screen game or perimeter runs or running the ball more, then that's something that we'll see.
So another guy that we want to talk about has gained a lot of steam in the spring and a little bit in the fall as well. But Tay Johnson is somebody that a lot of people are talking about and what he brings to the table. And I know the coaches love Tay and what he is and what he could be. Is there a chance, Brian, that he pushes for some playing time in this secondary?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just want to set you up. Just want to put the softball on the tee there for you.
Vince, when we saw him at Irish Invasion going into his junior year of high school, I think is what it was, he was tall, fast, rangy, and skinny. Very competitive. You'll love this, Vince, as a coach. You go to these camp, you have because you had two-way players in high school.
Oh, all the time.
You have these summer workouts, and you have that guy like, I'm just working on receiver right now, or I'm just working on DB right now. It was awesome watching Tay because he would line up at receiver, run a route, and then run back to the defensive back line and jump in and take a rep at DB. He would take a rep at DB and then run and jump to the front of the wide receiver line. He just wanted to compete. He didn't care if it was a receiver, DB. He just wanted to compete. And that's when I kind of first fell in love with Bronte as a prospect because you don't know that. And I'll just be honest, having recruited the city of Fort Wayne when I was coaching, you don't always get that with some of the athletes from there. You do from some play. I mean, Jalen Smith was that way and, Tyler Eifert and all that. But, it's a question mark. This kid's talented, but does he have a drive to be great? So that stood out to me right away with Bronte at that camp. But then you see a guy that's 6'2". He's and talk about the skinny Trev. You and I saw him at this year's Irish Invasion. He was working the camp. He's filling out. He had muscles. I mean, he looked like, okay, that's a college safety. And I thought his improvement this spring was great to see. And I wonder how much playing cornerback last year is going to help him. Because this is how versatile he is. When Jaden Mickey left and they started having some issues with injuries at corner, Benjamin Morrison goes down, Chance Tucker's out. They moved Bronte Johnson to corner, and he was getting in the end of some of those blowouts at corner last season. So when you talk about putting this unit together, he's the guy that presents some of the most potentially impactful pass game production. Guys, he's the guy that has the skill set that could eventually have a role similar to Xavier Watts. But Vince, what I saw from him this spring, which I think was the most important, is we already knew that was eventually going to be there. Bronte showed me the willingness to come downhill and stick. And we saw that, Vince, I think you were at that practice, but there was a play where they ran a play, it bounced, he was filling the alley, and it's him against a running back, and he just comes out here and pops the guy. You're like, okay, that's what I didn't know that Bronte was going to be able to do. And when we saw him do that, you're like, okay, like, yeah, Bronte's got a chance to live up to the potential, because he was always a bit of a low floor, high ceiling guy. For injuries are a big concern for him. I mean, he had an injury in high school that kept him out. He's had some little bumps and bruises in his 1 year at Notre Dame. He's got to stay healthy. Can his body hold up? He's definitely put on some armor. He's got the athleticism, but does he have the feel for the position? And is he going to be willing to come downhill and smack people? That's what I was encouraged to see. And and to me, in my opinion, just God-given ability. The two most physically gifted players on the depth chart are Jaydon Blair, who we're going to talk about in a second, and Bronte Johnson. And you could argue Bronte might be at the top of that list. It's at least debatable that Bronte's at the top of that list. And that's what gets you kind of exciting about what he can be. And look, I think Bronte's got a shot to win a starting job. I'm not predicting it. He's still young. He's still got a lot to learn. You know, he's a year behind Luke from a development standpoint, but the tools are there for Bronte to be a factor. At the very least, my expectations for Bronte Johnson this year is he's going to be in the rotation in some capacity, and he's going to be on just about every special teams coverage unit. Like, that's my minimum expectation for him this year. The ceiling for him this year, you guys tell me if you disagree with this, my ceiling for Bronte Johnson this year is that he eventually wins the starting job opposite of Don Schuler and gives you legit rangy coverage ability, skill at that field safety spot where Xavier Watts played. That's how I feel. That's what I feel his ceiling is this year. Can he be an All-American player this year? I'm not saying that, but as far as like the number, like, you know, what did you guys say? The running mate, so to speak, for a Don Schuler. I think he's got a shot to win that. Will it be game one? That I don't know. Will it be, because like that's like, okay, do they want Jaylen Strowman's experience kind of being on the field first against Miami? Maybe. Yeah. But I think Bronte's got a shot to win a spot in the rotation, and he's got a shot to win the starting job.
Or at least on the field early, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, just kind of taking in everything.
Right.
And like,
but it's not a given because of how deep they are.
Yeah.
But he's got the tools to absolutely be that. I think Bronte Johnson showed me in the spring. And now part of this is like I already had an opinion of him coming in. And so part of it is kind of confirmation bias. But that's kind of what this entails. Like, you had an opinion of a guy. Did he show you that you weren't wrong in those opinions? Well, athletically, yes, he did. He showed me that the athleticism that we thought he had is there. Now, can he become a great football player? That's going to be the question for Bronte. But, man, he's impressive athletically. Like, very impressive athletically.
Ceiling, I think, is up for debate between him and Jaydon. I'm with you there. But my takeaway from the spring with Bronte Johnson is I think right now he might be your most well-rounded safety in the rotation.
Certainly the returners.
Yeah. I mean, you go through and you think about, you know, Jaylen Strowman, his coverage ability, it's unknown, but I have to assume that it's relatively high, or his potential there is relatively high, or else Mike Mickens wouldn't have made the push to bring him to South Bend. Luke Talich, we know what he is from an alley safety standpoint, his willingness to hit and stick his nose down in the box. But from a pure coverage question mark, that is it's still one that's pretty high up on the list. But I would say that, you know, Bronte Johnson answered the question of his ability to stick his nose in around the box and fill the alley more than the answers that I got from Luke Talich from a coverage standpoint, if that makes sense. And so I think there is a case to be made that he might be your most well-rounded safety going into fall camp from what we got to see in the spring. Now, I think the next guy that we're going to talk about may have something to also say about that as well, along with the other list of guys that we had talked about. But from just what I got to see in the spring, I think Tate Johnson answered that question for me. he is definitely not out of the conversation to solidify himself in that starting lineup. Definitely in the rotation for sure.
The next guy we're going to talk about is a guy that sticks out when you see him walking around the defensive secondary. That's the best way I can describe it, because he sticks out walking around. And, that guy is Jaydon Blair. And Jaydon Blair has a lot going for him in this competition as well. And I think he has also, one of the things we noticed in the spring, Brian, is that he's not afraid to be vocal with guys too. And I think that's a huge check mark for me. If I was back there, trying to make a decision about who's going to get playing time and all that, I think from a mental standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, I feel like he checks some of those boxes off the bat for a young guy. And I think that is a very exciting piece of this for Mr. Blair.
I mean, it's funny you say that, because he does not look like a football player. I mean, he looks like a tall shooting guard, like not like a normal shooting guard, like a tall. He'd be the tallest guard that Notre Dame would have on their basketball team this year, except for what? I mean, do we count Ryder Frost as a guard, or is he more of like a wing? Like, he's tall, he's long, and he's filling out. I saw a picture of him from the summer, and you're like, okay, Jaydon's looking like he's filling out. He's starting to look the part more and more and more. But guys, he was like, Jaydon, obviously the injury he had that kept him out of the spring game was not a legitimate, it was legitimate. It wasn't a significant injury.
Right.
If it was a real game, he flat out would have played.
Correct.
And if you'd have seen him moving around in pregame, you're like, it was just like, look, he's having a great spring. Let's not take a chance of him being out there and getting rolled up on. We got a million safeties.
It's a practice. Like, there's
he had, like, what I was told by a couple people actually, is that in the 2 practices beforehand, he had like 4 or 5 interceptions in the practices. Now it's like, okay, I'm a little nervous about the quarterbacks throwing all these picks, but it's like with Jaydon, it's like, oh no, he's like 4 yards behind my guy. I've got room to throw that ball. And then you throw it and you're like, oh, he hadn't started really running yet. Like, and then he starts using them go gadget legs, and then next thing you know, he closes down and does that. But like with Jaydon, I knew he's going to be good in coverage. I mean, he's rangy, he's fast, he's smart. He was a very good receiver at Mount Tabor in North Carolina. The question was how quickly can he get used to the physical part? And like Bronte, there were times in the spring where we'd see Jaydon come down and just pop people. And you're like, okay, yes, he's got to get stronger. Same with Bronte. Bronte still got to get stronger. He's not going to look like Steve Atwater this season. It's not that they're just thumpers, but it's the willingness to come down there and smack people. We've seen big safeties that are ankle biters. Some guys just don't like contact. That's just the reality of it. Some guys get uncomfortable, really they're not willing to just throw themselves. Like, not everybody was meant to be wedge busters back in the day. We were talking about kick returns the other day. There are some big, strong guys that could run fast. You wish wanted to be wedge busters, but like, he wanted no part of that smoke. And then there's that little 5'9", like 175-pound kid is like, I'll do it. It's like, well, yeah, I know you're crazy and you'll do it, but like, you're going to throw yourself out sideways and bounce right off that thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like, but he had that mindset, like, I want this smoke. And so with Bronte and Jaydon, that's what was good to see, is how quickly would they adapt to the physical part of the game, because they were used very similarly in high school, in that they both played 2 ways, because Bronte played quarterback for his team as a senior. They were both more rangy cover type of players. And yeah, Jaydon would tackle well in high school, but how was he going to feel about coming down and tackling Jadarian Price and Kedron Young and Jabron Payne? And that's a different type of back than what he faced in high school. And the fact that he was willing to do that and do it physically was a sight to see. There's not one of these kids in spring was I like, I don't know if that guy wants to be that kind of, and that's what is encouraging to see. And that's where you're like, okay, at least mindset wise, Mike Mickens has made smart decisions with who they went after, because they all have the mindset. They're all smart kids. And like Bronte, Jaydon was getting a lot of first team snaps the last couple of days of fall camp or spring practice. There was the one clip that Notre Dame put out of him breaking up a pass against Eli Raritan. And then the next clip of is him, shaking hands with Adon Schuler. Well, why was he covering Eli Raritan, and why was Adon Schuler dapping him up on the field? Because it was ones against ones.
They were out there together
with the ones.
Yeah.
So they all got work. Don't read too much into that statement. They all got work with the ones, but they all got work with the ones because they're all in that competition. There were other safeties that didn't get work with the ones. I don't know that Ethan Long got works with the ones. I don't know that Kennedy Urlacher was getting work with, with the one, would have gotten work with the ones had he stayed around. And so you look at all those type of things and you say, okay, he's in this conversation. And you talk about best all around game, Trevor, you mentioned that. I believe you said that about Bronte. Agree. It's these two are the two that have the best all around potential. There's no question about it. That's why we get into the ceiling is so high for them, because they're both long, they're both rangy, they're both very athletic, but they also both have the potential to be impact players against the pass and the run. And that's why, I mean, look, Jaydon's going to be really hard to keep off the field. Really hard to keep off the field this season. And I just, barring injury, I don't know how that happens. He's going to play. The question is, does he start? Is he number 3? Is he number 4? What's that answer going to be? And the thing I like about Jaydon is he can play both safety spots, but he's another guy that I could see if you're playing a team, a spread team, an air raid team that likes to throw a ton of perimeter screens and a ton of bubble screens and slant routes and quick routes and outside runs like a USC. There's a case to be made that at times you may want a Bronte or a Jaydon Blair in that slot position as opposed to Devontae Smith, because you want a bigger body that's blowing up the perimeter run game and the perimeter screen game in certain looks. And I think he's got the tools to do that. So yeah, I mean, he's a big kid. I mean, we met him. He was hanging out at the IB tailgate for a while for the Indiana game. Comes from a great family. His dad played in the NFL for a little bit as a D lineman, if that gives you any sense of
it's put together.
Yes. But he looks like his dad, but he's not built like his dad. He's tall like his family, but his dad's just a big guy. Jaydon has a little bit of a different frame, but you see where the DNA comes from. His dad played D1 defensive line, played in the NFL for a little bit, I think 3 or 4 years as a D lineman in the NFL. So he's another guy that's got some of the DNA. He's an NFL dad. It's just not the Plexico Burress, Jerome Bettis Jr., Larry Fitzgerald, Thomas Davis Jr. type of DNA. But he's another kid whose dad was a former professional athlete. And what I love about Jaydon too, and Bronte's this way as well, but Jaydon is a very confident young man, very confident. But there's also a level of humility to his confidence. His confidence comes from more of the work that he's put in to get to where he is, as it is about just, I'm the man. He's confident in his ability because he works at it. And I think that's an important piece to this puzzle too. There's no sense of, you better play me because you paid me this much money in NIL and I was a highly ranked recruit. No, it's like, dude, I know I want to play, so I'm going to go in and earn it. And he's gonna be hard to keep off the field, guys. As long as he can stay healthy. This is the kid I'm most certain will be in the rotation, other than Jaylen Strowman. The only question is where. Is he 2? Is he 3? Is he 4? Is he 5? But I highly doubt that he's gonna he won't be in the rotation in some capacity.
Trevor, I'm going to throw this next one to you, sir, because a part of this is, we kind of talked about this before. It was like, where do we put the nickel? Do we put it with the safeties? Do we put it with the corners? And the nickel position is a position that has corners that are trying out for it, and it has safeties that are kind of in the mix. And so we do want to talk about it a little bit when we have this conversation about safety, because there are some safeties, that are in the mix. And so there's 2 guys that we kind of want to talk about here. And we've already kind of talked about a little bit about Ben Minich and
Tabron Benny Powell.
And Tabron Benny, excuse me. Mm-hmm. We have not talked about Ben Minich yet, but Ben and Tabron Benny Powell are the 2 guys that are kind of in the mix at nickel as well, whether that's starting or whether that's in the rotation or whatever the case may be. But they're 2 safeties that they could see some time at nickel, Trev.
Yeah, I mean, one of the bigger question marks that not a lot of people are talking about going into fall camp is the depth at nickel. There's a lot of names being thrown into this hat. And Ben Minich and Tabron Benny Powell are 2 of them. Then you also have Carson Hobbs and Dallas Golden and Corey Thomas. So what does that look like for them? But, we started to see Ben Minich take more snaps at the nickel position this past spring, kind of helping round out the depth. One thing that I've been very consistent about talking about was I did not know how fast Ben was until watching him in spring practice and in spring games. I know the biggest question for him is going to be, him remaining healthy and being able to round out that depth. But he's a player that, can play safety, maybe projects a little bit better to the nickel position. And then Tabron Benny-Powell, he's somebody that has a lot of length. You just kind of look at him. He has long arms. He has a good size frame. I think he's like 6'1", 6'2"-ish in that area. And I think for him, it's a little bit of, okay, safety room is loaded. I have a pretty high ceiling. What is the quickest path to get me on the field and kind of prove my worth? And I think the nickel position is wide open in terms of a depth barring injury. I don't think any one of the guys that we mentioned is going to insert themselves in the starting lineup, because I think that's held down pretty securely by Devontae Smith. But it's also unrealistic that he's going to take 800 snaps this upcoming season at the nickel. There could be different looks that they want to present. Brian brought up another scenario earlier talking about Bronte Johnson or Jaydon Blair. If they're going up against a team like a USC, maybe they want a bigger body around the line of scrimmage closer to the box. Maybe they insert themselves in. That's kind of Tabron Benny-Powell. He's a little bit of that bigger, nickel corner type of build. And so the conversation around those two are extremely interesting. And I'm going to be keeping my eye out on both those guys heading into fall camp, and as far as how the nickel depth is going to start playing itself out.
What a lot of people don't know is that Ben Minnick is one of the fastest defensive backs they have outside of like the two corners. He's very fast. The concern with Ben Minnick is his body just hasn't held up yet so far. He's been banged up a lot, but he's more of a factor in the than maybe we think, as far as a guy that like could play either at safety or at the nickel spot, or maybe both. I mean, he's the one that had that great pick of CJ Carr. I mean, he read the route perfectly, stepped in front of it, picked the pass off. I think he was playing nickel in that particular play. Tabron Benny-Powell, a guy that I was not real high on coming out of high school, he was solid in the spring game. I mean, it was like, okay, this kid showed me a little something. Like his breakup, I think it was Elijah Burris, but just running on a crossing route. Kenny Minchie threw it a little bit late. Tabron did a great job of breaking in front of the receiver, breaking the pass up. Like, okay, if this is the two guys at the bottom of your depth chart, which a lot of us think, thought going into spring, you've got a phenomenal safety depth chart. But I think what helps both of them is they have the potential to play multiple spots. Their guys are right now are getting a lot of time in nickel, which then I think helps them if Notre Dame's getting into situations where, let's say, the coverage isn't good enough at safety. Like, okay, well, these are two guys that can help you in coverage at safety. So I think they solidify the depth, but they're also going to be factors. Like, what if something happens to Devontae Smith? Who's that next guy? Like Vince brought up, who's that next guy? It could be one of these two guys. It could be a corner. It could be one of these two guys. And so they're going to get their chance. And it's you don't often see where you go into a season where literally every returner to position is in competition to start, where you're not freaking out about your lack of depth. Because there's times like, well, we only got three guys. Every veteran coming back is going to be, in the rotation some way, which is kind of true corner, right? Like, we don't take out Chance Tucker because of we don't know where he's at injury-wise, but like every other returner is going to be in the two deep. It's because there's only three other returners from last year, you know what I mean? But this is a situation where like they're all battling, and it's deep. It's a deep position group, but they're all battling for some kind of role. But I got to say, Ben Minnick and Tabron Benny-Powell deserve some mention here, because they both impressed us during the spring, especially in the blue gold game, making plays on the ball. And, we don't talk enough about them, but then they're talented footballers. I've had people tell me Ben Minnick can play. He's just undersized and gets banged up a little bit, which hopefully that doesn't keep happening. But you talk to anybody around the program and say, that kid's athletic as heck. He's fast. He can play. And Tabron's been a surprise. So I like it when I don't think a kid's that good, or don't think a kid's Notre Dame caliber player, when he kind of comes and says, well, actually, I can play here. Now, the issue with Tabron is he's still tight-hipped. He's one of the few guys in the secondary safety position that got really tight hips. And that concerns me a little bit. But honestly, he showed me the instincts and feel and speed to be able to overcome that a little bit during the blue gold game. So I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw from Tabron. He's already better. Like where he was this spring, is where I thought he might be able to get to by his junior year. Maybe senior year. So that's a good sign.
This is the part of the depth chart where I usually say, let's talk about the young guys. We've been talking about young guys. Yeah. We're going to talk about the youngest guys. and you know, we're talking about Brandon Logan and Ethan Long. And, you know, I don't think that these guys are necessarily in the running to start, or maybe they could surprise and get into the rotate. You know, what are the expectations for these young guys, Brian?
I'll just say this, and I'll let Trev talk about it any further if he wants to, but there's been years in the past where Ethan Long and Brandon Logan would have had a shot to come in and crack the 2 deep. But it's going to be very hard for them to do so this year just because of how deep the position group is. But, you know, Ethan was solid this spring, long, tall, rangy, did some good things. Brandon Logan's an extremely athletic player that can also – now, Brandon Logan's more in the Ben Minnick, Tabron Benny Powell role of a safety that can also play nickel. And so it wouldn't shock me if Brandon Logan gets some shots early on at nickel, because he's a guy that is 5'11", 190, fast. Remember, he ran a 4.4 at Notre Dame's Irish Invasion going into his senior year. Elite athlete, an elite baseball player, also was previously committed to Vanderbilt. I don't know. Did he get drafted, Vince? Do you know if he got drafted?
I don't know.
I'm going to go look that up. But
yeah.
Anyway,
he's planning on playing for Notre Dame too, right? In the spring.
Yeah. The only concern was, and I completely forgot to go look it up, is there was some concern that if he got drafted high enough that he might, you know, go to the NFL draft. But I didn't look and see where he got drafted, so I'll have to look that up. But anyway, the point is, I think Brandon Logan is a kid. Yeah, he went undrafted. It's only like 10 rounds now, right?
It's so much smaller than it ever was before. It used to go like 30 rounds, like a ridiculous amount. And now that they've gotten, I'm going to go on a tangent. Now they've gotten rid of a bunch of minor league teams. They don't need to have as big of a draft because they don't have as many teams.
They got rid. What leagues did they get rid of?
I mean, they got rid of like a ton of minor league. Okay. Like each minor league team each major league team, I think, only has 4 total teams.
Gotcha.
Because they used to have, you know, all kinds of like single A levels.
They had Florida. They had the Florida League or Arizona League. You had they had 2 rookie leagues. You had the high. You know, it was like the Reds. They had their team in Arizona and then team in Florida.
So it was high A, low A.
Billings, which is the high A rookie team. Then you had the low A team. Then you had your high A team, your double A team, and your triple A team. So
now it's just A, double A, triple A, and then I think they have like a fall league, like a rookie league.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, they've downsized it big time. So
that's unfortunate. But anyway,
yeah.
And I know the draft used to be 50 rounds long, and now it's
like it's so much shorter. Yeah. So much shorter. Yeah.
So that was kind of good news for Notre Dame.
Notre Dame football. Yeah.
That he's not, that he didn't get drafted higher, but heck of a baseball player, heck of an athlete. He might have a shot, but I just think these 2 kids are most likely destined for redshirt seasons. Yeah. And I normally don't advocate for redshirts for skill players, but because of how young this position group is overall, and I think both of these kids are raw, Brandon technically, Ethan physically, I think both could really benefit from a red shirt where they can get some separation between themselves and Bronte and Luke and Jaydon and that type of thing. And it's also, their presence is also why you're not seeing Notre Dame pushing for another big safety class. They've got 1 pure safety in the class, and that's Nick Reddish, who I say pure safety as far as how he's used in high school. He could easily be a nickel as well. And then there's the expectation Joe O'Brien's going to move to safety, and they're like, all right, we're good. We're good. Why? Because they're so deep there, but also because they're so young there. And I fully expect Ethan and Brandon Logan to redshirt. And if they don't redshirt, that's a good sign for Notre Dame. That means they're ready to play. But I don't expect either to be factors this year.
Yeah, I was going to say around the redshirt conversation, it's going to be interesting to see if Marty Biaggi has something to say about one of those 2 guys redshirting or not. That's always going to be a factor as well, because having somebody as athletic as Brandon Logan and somebody with the size and athleticism of what Ethan Long has, it's going to be hard to keep them off the special teams unit. But as far as like pure defensive snaps, I'm with you completely.
Yeah, special teams coordinators love safeties and linebackers. And because they're usually fast and athletic, and especially at Notre Dame. And so he's going to have kind of his pick of the litter. So, yeah, that's going to be some interesting, boardroom conversations when it comes to who they're going to redshirt and who they're not, and what that looks like, and all of those different things. Those conversations, I'm sure, have gotten interesting over at Notre Dame because of the depth of talent, for sure. So, because guys that would have never redshirted in the past are now redshirting because there's so much depth and talent when it comes to special teams and everything else. So, a very, very fun conversation to have. So, that's going to do it for our depth chart breakdown, fellas. Be sure to give us hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, share with your family and friends, and of course, jump on the boards over at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check out the written content over at irishbreakdown.com. There's always some fun stuff over there. I know that Trevor's been working on his countdown series as well. So there's always good content over at irishbreakdown.com. So you definitely want to jump on that. And of course, like I said, jump on the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.